Welcome to Sagas and Sass Season 2. I'm Tara, along with my fellow host Jonathan, and a special guest tonight, Seth. This episode will cover Crucible of Gold, Book 7 in Naomi Novik's Temeraire series.
If you're watching live, join us in the chat, or after the fact, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Sagas and Sass to continue the conversation.
And just a reminder, the views expressed in this show are those of the hosts as individuals and do not necessarily represent the show as a whole. And now I'm going to pause for a second because we have a little summary that we do, but for some reason the text is very, very small and I have terrible eyesight. I am basically a blind person. So I'm going to make that bigger so I can see. All right. So it's been a while since we've talked about Temeraire, but when last we left Lawrence and Temeraire, they seemed pretty content to be settling in their valley in Australia. But we were certain that wouldn't last for long, and of course we were right. Crucible of Gold starts off with none other than Arthur Hammond showing up to reinstate Lawrence to the Aerial Corps, which, Hammond. But at least we get an amusing encounter with bunyips out of it before Hammond announces that the Corps want Lawrence and Temeraire to hie off to South America in an attempt to form an alliance with the Incans, and from there go to Brazil to protect their Portuguese allies who are under attack from the Tswana, who are from, oh gosh, what book
Africa.
is that now? Well, yeah, Africa. I know Africa. Who are from? Where are they from? I'm just trying to remember which
New
book they're
Jersey.
from. Empire of Ivory, I believe it was book 4.
Empire of Ivory.
Book 4. Okay. And of course, they aren't alone, Lawrence and Temeraire, that is. In addition to Temeraire's albeit much diminished crew, Granby and Iskirka show up to tag along, and Lawrence also insists on bringing Domain and Kilingile, not trusting them to the care of Rankin and the other Corps members remaining in Australia. Oh, and Lawrence being Lawrence, he gets it in his head that Emily Rowland needs a chaperone and hires a widow named Mrs. Pemberton to round out their party. So they set sail on the Allegiance once again, but So they set sail on the Allegiance once again, but along the way, a 5-day-long storm culminates in a shipboard fire that destroys the ship, killing many, including Captain Riley. Which, side note, what the fuck? He dies off page after all this time. Not that we're all that sad to see him go, but something feels off here, so we're side-eyeing this real hard. Anyway, the dragons and most of their crews survive, but there is no land in sight, and eventually they're captured by the French just as their exhaustion is about to get the better of them. They sail together for a time, during which Iskirka befriends an Incan dragon named Mela, who is traveling with the French as an emissary. However, instead of bringing Temeraire and the others to oh my gosh, I don't know what's wrong with me today. However, instead of bringing Temeraire and the others to South America with them, the French maroon them on a tiny island, which they then escape just in time thanks to their discovering a shipwreck that includes a map of similar islands leading almost all the way to the South American coast. How convenient.
When they finally make it to the Incan Empire, however, they find its people decimated by plague, and also discover that here the dragons are the tribal leaders. There is a somewhat worrisome practice of them stealing others' people, which has come about because there are so few people spread throughout the empire now. But for the most part, the humans seem fine with things being the way they are. Though Iskirka does something mistakenly abduct an old blind man named Taruka, who had been taken from his family quite some time ago, and asks them to bring him back. But first, the dragon to whom he belongs challenges Iskirka, and when she accepts, it turns out she isn't fighting that dragon, but the champion of the state, an acid spitter who has apparently won dozens of fights. And I've just managed to go the wrong way up the screen.
We're a mess tonight. It's fine. It happens.
Folks, we're experiencing technical difficulties. We'll get back to the summary.
Of course, Iskirka wins the fight, and off the British dragons go, taking Taruka home. Taruka's Ayu is surprised, a bit confused, but very happy to have him return to them, and in part because she is taking a liking to Hammond, the dragon leader's daughter, Cherky, agrees to lead them to the Empress Kuzco. Once there, they are greeted by Malia, who turns out to be a member of the Empress's... is it Ailu?
Ailu. Yeah, I looked it up. I literally Googled how to pronounce it, and thank God it's a real word.
And is clearly absolutely besotted with Iskirka for reasons no one, least of all Temeraire, can figure. However, this crush leads to her being invited to court, where she somehow manages to convince the currently single Empress to consider none other than Granby as her consort, which is all hilarious in its own right, But here's where we get some of those cringeworthy Lawrence moments we haven't been missing at all, because Granby comes out to Lawrence. And unfortunately, this alternate history series is so very stuck on being as historically accurate as possible.
But then Napoleon randomly appears. The Empress basically immediately chooses him over Granby, and the British are summarily chased out of the Incan Empire. Thankfully, Turkey shows up to help them, or they probably never would have escaped at all. And after yet another mini travelogue, thankfully a shorter one than many that have come before in this series, they reach Brazil. And although Granby has lost his arm due to an injury he acquired and then irritated throughout their travels, overall things could be worse. And in fact, while it might be the loss of his arm that finally tips the scales, apparently Iskerka trying to marry him off put Granby on edge because he finally gives her what for, telling her she has to stop doing whatever she wants, whenever she wants, and listen to him or leave him for good. Iskerka, well, freaks out a little bit over this. Could it be that she will finally be brought to heel, if only a little bit? When they finally reach Rio, they discover it was burnt by the Portuguese, not the Tswana, and that the slave owners are holding their slaves hostage to prevent the dragons from attacking to get their family members back. Lily's formation arrives, and the dragons quickly realize that even with Temeraire, Iskerka, and Kilingale already entrenched near Rio, there's no way they can beat the Tswana. If they had even wanted to fight them, which they don't. Lawrence tries to convince the Portuguese to allow the Tswana to colonize alongside them because, Napoleon allying with the Incans is going to screw them anyway. And eventually they come to a tenuous agreement that allows for the Tswana to choose whether they will stay in Brazil or return home to Africa. Unfortunately, there are not enough transports to carry all of them who wish to return, which leads to Lawrence organizing a little skirmish to capture the 2 French transports anchored off the Brazilian coast. And that's finally, basically, the end of that. Except that we suppose it's important to note that Gong Su reveals that he's not really a cook, but is rather an agent of the Chinese prince, who seems to be strongly hinting that the Chinese want to form an alliance with Britain. With that, it's somewhat awkwardly decided that Temeraire, Iskerka, Kilingale, Lily, and the rest, Lily and the rest of her formation, and even Turkey, who won't leave Hammond's side, will make their way to China. Wow. That's a lot of these names are getting just so ridiculous now.
You could pull an old Gilligan's Island and just and the rest them.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I did at the end. Lily and the rest of her formation, because I don't think there's any need to list. I don't even remember half of them. I remember.
But are there even any anymore? I guess they're the small.
Yeah, there's Dulcia. And
still around? Okay.
Immortalis and what's Berkeley's dragon's name? The big one.
Dasher, Dancer,
yeah, starts with an M.
Maximus.
Maximus, thank you. Yeah. I was going to say Magnificat, but I was like, no, that's not right. So she does still have, because I think Lily's whole formation survived the plague thing. But we haven't seen, any of them since book 4. They kind of make a brief appearance in book 5 when Napoleon invades England, but that's it. It's very brief too, because most of that book is spent with Temeraire and the breeding ground dragons.
Right.
Yeah.
Which okay, so Seth, it's been a while since you've read this. Did the summary bring anything good back to you?
It brought some stuff back. I just remember feeling I am of 2 minds about some of the stuff in this series. Now, for whatever reason, I like a good Napoleonic War story as well as the next man or person, but I have to explain that. Degree in Irish Studies, do not care for the Brits, pretty much at all. But for some reason, enjoy Napoleonic War stories. But she goes to great lengths to sort of rehabilitate the British Empire by making it not the British Empire. She's like, well, they've got to stop the slave trade. Otherwise, they're going to lose to Napoleon. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. And they didn't conquer a lot of other places because of dragons. Gotta go. So, I get that. I get that in one way, it's kind of good that this is happening because, she is actually going a little bit, at least in detail and in depth, on what the British were actually doing at the time. But at the same time, she's sort of like, then, well, okay, sweeping that under the rug, because that's not what we want to focus on now. We want to focus on dragons and Napoleon.
She's really obsessed with Napoleon.
Yeah.
Like, in interviews and everything, that the few things I've read about her and just kind of about this series as I've been doing like research for summaries and stuff after reading them, she is seriously obsessed with Napoleon. And it yeah, like you said, it's like things that are actually more interesting and could be more important as well. And truly making it an alternate history gets swept under the rug because she has to bring him back constantly.
Yeah. And I mean, like this, it's like, oh, okay, I guess. All right. For basically being for showing up for a marriage that's going to bring him a big part of another continent. Okay, yeah, I can see him doing that. But he does show up. Like, I want to say in the Bernard Cornwell's Sharps series of books, he barely shows up at all. I mean, in the Waterloo book, they sort of glimpse him from afar, and I think in one of the other books, he shows up as a minor character. But he's very involved with these dragons.
I mean, I didn't read all the Horatio Hornblower books, but I don't think he shows up at all in those either.
No, because that's just talk about Horatio hanging out and being honorable, and then luckily the wife that he married out of duty dies, and he gets to marry the woman he wants to.
I didn't get that far.
And that's Horatio Hornblower. There was a story in that book where he is transporting an Irish rebel, and unfortunately figures out what the guy's trying to do and stops him. And I'm like, but the Empire was not in the right on that one. Like, there's a Sherlock Holmes story where he does the same thing, and I feel very conflicted.
Yeah, I just like, and it's not just that Napoleon shows up consistently in the story, you know, like even when they're in Australia in book like 4, it's like this constant like, but how is Napoleon involved in this sort of like you know, just constant like kind of give back to him. But literally he shows up in person so much.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily have an issue with that, you know, like I like that he comes, I like when they see him in book 3, Black Powder War, which is so far of the books we've talked about on this show, my least favorite of the Temeraire series, but it might have been surpassed by the one I read, the one I just finished reading. We'll talk about that in a couple weeks. But you know, he doesn't, it's in this one where it really throws me off guard that Napoleon literally shows up in person. Because he just left Europe to travel across the Atlantic all the way to South America. And then, I guess they would have traveled. I don't know how they got there. They either traveled across the Atlantic and then came through Brazil, or they traveled down around Cape Horn, whatever. He's been traveling for a long ass time.
Yeah, no, they crossed the Atlantic from Portugal, basically from Portugal.
Yeah, but he's been traveling for a long ass time, and it's just a lot. Like, he left all of Europe behind just for this. And again, like they're left with this. How are they going to even get all these dragons back to Europe and stuff? You know.
Well, I would say yes. You got the gold of the Incan Empire. It would be one reason why, and that gives them a lot more money to pay for arms. It gives them a lot more dragons. I mean, yes, it would be worth it
for a prize of this stature. Yes. But, you know, have you gotten to the point where you meet
Granby for the honor? I mean, you know,
yeah. That's I also love Iskirka's reasoning on this one. It's like, well, I'm the best dragon, so Granby's the best human, and if I can marry him to an empress, then I'm going to be an even better dragon and have a. But she's so. she's so sort of purely selfish about things. It's kind of endearing. She's not unlike a cat.
But a very large
Fire-breathing one. Yeah.
Fire-breathing cat. I mean, and we've talked about Escarika before, and it's like as frustrating as she can be, I also do just love her.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in this book, I was glad to finally get her see a little bit of her comeuppance. Because I mean, her trying to get the Incan Empress to marry Granby without even like talking to him about it. Like, in one respect, I'm almost proud of her because somehow she basically became, you know, she became the middleman in a very, you know, major marriage negotiation and didn't screw it up of her
political
own accord.
negotiation.
Yeah, and political marriage, yeah. But at the same time, it's like, oh, Escarika, like I know you're only doing this because you know that Lawrence is a prince of China and you want Granby to also be like royalty. And of course there's like seeing, you know, the gilded walls, and they're not even gilded, they're actual gold walls and everything. She wants the riches and she wants Granby to have that title and everything, because Lawrence has that title basically. And it's just,
yeah.
Oh man, Escarika, it's a lot. And I'm glad that in the end, Granby finally sticks up to her.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was one thing when she was essentially a pirate, sort of. I mean, I guess technically a privateer because she wasn't also raiding British ships.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, but even then, it's like most of the time that didn't cause issues for the British or for Granby most of the time.
Yeah.
And what issues it did cause were kind of minor at best. But if anything, you know, she was mostly capturing French ships, I believe. So doing her duty and also getting her prizes out of it and everything. But at the same time, like, she clearly, like, she was not listening to him. Like, there were other things she was supposed to be doing. There were duties she was shirking so that she could, you know, go capture these ships and everything. So I do have to hope that Granby finally putting his foot down will, you know, lead to her not causing as much trouble. And I think that the way that this is how it was finally revealed that Granby is gay was just like, and it's Gecko was like, yeah, so what? Like, he'll marry this empress and he'll be the consort and he'll give her some babies and he can do whatever he wants otherwise. And it's like, I don't know if that's how it works, but I like how flippant you are about his sexuality, especially when we've got like Lawrence over here being like, what do I say? What do I think? Oh my gosh, I know guys do this, but they're not actually, you know, sinners. They're just doing it because there's nothing else available. And it's like, I know that Naomi Novik wants these books to be as like historically accurate as possible, but there are some times like this one where I just want to bang my head against a wall. Like, you wrote this. I actually don't remember what year this was published, but it was recently-ish.
It's not that.
I'm going to look it up because that's like going to bother me.
I want to say maybe late 2000s, early 2010s.
Well, the series, 2012. This one's 2012.
There we go.
So, because the series, I was going to say, started in like 2006 or maybe a couple years before. But, you know, I guess in 2012, I put this in the notes because part of me like would love to ask her, you know, listen, I know that you're trying to make these as historically accurate as possible while also having dragons. But if you could take this book and write it now, like if you're writing it now instead of in, you know, 2010, 2011, when you wrote it the first time, like do it all over again, would you still treat Granby being gay the same way? Because it's like, there's a lot here that didn't happen in history. And I feel like it's very odd to say like, okay, let's, I mean, and we've talked about before the women aviators and everything. I just feel like it's I especially the women aviators, I feel like she put some of that in to like make it like an amusing side thing that they're constantly having to deal with this nonsense because they're women and not supposed to be in the service or whatever. But at the same time, I feel like it would just be a lot more interesting if it was a slightly different society in which that was accepted.
In a world where you can imagine a functioning Incan Empire in the 19th century, it seems like imagining that being gay isn't a big deal is not a more difficult step.
Yeah. A functioning empire that's run by a woman, nonetheless, an empress.
Well, but you had functioning empires run by women before too. I mean, including the British Empire,
but not yet.
Yes, Elizabeth.
But that was the kingdom.
Oh yeah, they weren't quite an
I'm splitting hairs. Okay, but yes, no.
Yeah, you are splitting hairs.
Yeah. Elizabeth. Yeah. It's but it's I mean, well, but then again,
so, I mean,
like Elizabeth,
the Earth had women leaders at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, yes, it was a man's world. It's still realistically a man's world, unfortunately. But the changing the whole dynamic, even with Elizabeth, didn't change the society all that much, right? I mean,
no,
just didn't,
or at all,
or at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that again, I mean, I just I'm torn at times because there are I like as a history major the fact that she tries so hard most of the time to get things historically accurate while still having it be this alternate history is fun to me. But at the same time, it's like, again, like if you were writing this 10 years later, would you write it the same way? Like, would you choose to change that? You could still, because that's the thing, like you could still have you can still make it as close to historically accurate as possible with like Napoleon and the Napoleonic Wars and the colonialism and everything, but have like societal norms be different, which honestly with dragons in their midst it should be.
Well, the other thing is if you one of the problems with this book, and it's something you kind of have to accept and just because otherwise it's going to drive you nuts, is dragons, but everything's still largely the same. So the English in this book think and act and talk as do English people from, at the very least, historical novels set in the same era, right? Yeah. But it's like, okay, so there's dragons. Okay, well, then why do we assume that William the Conqueror won and that history proceeded exactly as it did from that point? And there is an England in the way that we recognize England.
Yeah.
It's and you could apply that to any country.
Well, especially since they make it sound as if the Aerial Corps is not super recent, but certainly a recent, and I mean they talk about how dragons were wild and feral like not all that long ago. So and it's very vague as to whether this is just a Britain thing. Like clearly it wasn't that way in China. We know it wasn't that way in China.
Yeah.
But then if it wasn't that way in China and the British just showed up there with their paltry little ships and their paltry little dragons, like how in God's name did the Chinese like ever give them anything? You know what I mean? Like yeah. It's very there's a lot of and I completely understand. Obviously you have to suspend some disbelief here, but that's what I'm saying. Like if you're going to suspend some disbelief for these things, then why not suspend some disbelief in regards to women, like female aviators and men being gay, especially in the Aerial Corps, which is like almost entirely made up of men, and they literally like can't. This isn't like in the Navy where they can just pop off at a port and leave their dragon chilling for days to go screw some hookers. Like,
Well, I mean, yes, they can. I mean,
They-
that doesn't change.
to
It
an
doesn't take
extent.
all that long.
I mean, since we're talking about dragons and historicity, not to get too far into the weeds, but if I can drag old George 2 Martin into this,
we usually do at some point. Don't worry.
Well, okay, that's great. That's great. Yeah. I don't want to confuse it with the book, so I believe it is The Dance of Dragons is the Targaryen Civil War.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is somewhat loosely based on the English period called the Anarchy, where, if I recall correctly, the Empress Maud or Matilda was engaged in a struggle against her nephew King Stephen, I think.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that is actually a much sharper historical look at what happens when you do this and you have dragons. Now, again, the result is largely the same. But it's a better study of how, in that case, dragons don't particularly matter, whereas we're asked to believe in this universe that dragons do, except they didn't, in order to get everybody to the same places that they are in our 19th century.
Well, except part of, I would argue, in this, at least in this universe, Europe, North America, and Asia seem to be in the same place. Yes. Africa and South America are not at all.
That is very true. That's very true. But then my question is, if they're, why not in the other places? And honestly,
and I don't. And if that's not the case, then it makes no logical sense that the others would have evolved the same way.
Right. But there we are. And I want to say, even in North America, if I'm remembering, have you gotten to the part where the North American dragon shows up?
No,
that's the next book.
What's his name?
Well, I mean, I have, but that's the next book.
Yeah, no, don't even mention his name. We'll talk about that.
All right.
We'll talk about it a couple of weeks. Honestly, if you're around, you can probably join us then too, because we're missing our usual fourth host.
Based on what I remember of his conversations, it seems like things went a very different way in North America than they did.
Well, yeah,
here,
and that actually is something that's actually something that they bring up in one of the past books. I could not tell you which one. I don't think it's the one where, I don't think it's the last one, book 6, where they're in Australia. So it might be book 4 or 5, or maybe even as far back as 3. But they discuss that that the Americans are breeding dragons and you're using them as like couriers and stuff. Like they're much closer to the Chinese way of treating dragons than they are to the British way.
Yeah.
So that is something that is it's briefly mentioned, but it's mentioned enough that it's like, oh, America, capitalism. Yup.
Yeah, well, that is yes, and I will not say anything about the dragon, but yes, he's there. He's got some fun stuff happening.
Yeah,
with
yeah.
It's
like one of the 0.2 things I liked about book 8, but yeah. Well, yeah. I have so much crap to say about book 8, so I don't want to even touch on it right now. But especially because Crucible of Gold has enough going on. Okay, so first of all, speaking of like new dragons, we meet a whole bunch of new dragons. And here's my question for you guys, because I'm really still confused about it. Temeraire keeps referring to them as having like feathers. And is it actually feathers, or is Temeraire just saying their scales look like feathers? I know they're very colorful and that their scales or whatever move. I think they're longer maybe and move more than European dragons or whatever. But like,
no, I interpret that they were actually feathers.
Okay,
yeah, to go with the whole Quetzalcoatl thing.
Okay. So more along the lines of actual, like what velociraptors look like instead of Jurassic Park velociraptors.
Yes, but I thought, like, when in my mind I pictured the literally, like, they look like Quetzalcoatl's, so they have that big like feathery collar around their necks, and then the
Mhm.
rest is scales.
Okay. Yeah, it's the way it's described, and I was thinking about that, and I was like, okay, so is she just bringing in their sort of mythology? I hope so, but it's because you're seeing it mostly through Temeraire's eyes, and he's very like psh, psh about it. He hates it a lot. I think because he's probably a little bit jealous, maybe.
Yeah.
Because I would guess like this. Despite his just constant, feelings about Iskirka, he really does not like her being friends with the dragon Mela. And at first I was like, is it just because Mela is, the envoy to the French? But it seems to go deeper than that. And I don't think it's necessarily jealous because he's in love with her.
Uh-oh. Well, I'm going to go ahead and continue that thread and say that, it's one of those things where he might not be in love with her, but it's like he was used to getting that attention, and now he's not getting that attention anymore.
Yes, and that's definitely true.
Sorry, guys. I don't know what, I think my internet bleeped for a second. Blipped for a second.
So
Anyway,
Seth
sorry.
just postulated Temeraire is jealous because of he's used to getting the attention.
Yeah. Even though he acts like he doesn't like the attention, and his character is very annoying to him. It's so weird because like I always felt Iskirka was more of a little sister to him than anything else. And in this book, it's because
Well, I mean, he would
finally
be robbing the cradle. If
yeah, and they finally go off to make an egg together toward the end, right?
Wait, hang on. Isn't he only like 5 years old at this point?
Yes, I'm joking.
No.
Yeah, it's okay. I was like,
no, he's old. I think he's approaching 8, but he was only like.
But drone dragons live for like hundreds of years.
Yeah,
I mean, he's essentially.
He was only
infant.
he was only a couple years old when she was hatched. So
yeah.
But for me, it's more like just I always felt like it was this annoyed big brother with his annoying little sister type of relationship. But yeah, I think you're probably right that it's more about the attention, and also the fact that Temeraire is a little jealous of Mela, who also speaks, a couple languages and is, very colorful and I guess attractive in that respect. It's sort of like, like male peacocks, like who has the bigger feathers, who has the bigger, brighter feathers.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a very interesting turn of events to see him be just kind of not annoyed with Iskirka because she was annoying him, but annoyed with Iskirka because she was paying attention to another dragon.
So, on a totally separate note, what I would describe as the sort of weird but almost family dynamics of dragons and their humans in the Incan Empire.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to talk about that. So the Ailus, which listen, Google told me it was Ailu. I feel like it's probably more like Ailu, but whatever. I'm going with Google pronunciation. So Ailu, which sounds like not South American or Incan at all, but okay. So that it literally means family. And it's interesting how originally it's portrayed as a slavery sort of thing. But then the more you get to know, the only part of it that is akin to slavery is the fact that because that area has been decimated by, smallpox and God knows what else, there are so few humans that the poorer / lesser dragons will, if they find people, if they find other dragons, human family members by themselves, they will carry them off. And then it becomes if they get caught, then there's a discussion about things. There's maybe a challenge where they fight, each other, or one of them fights a champion of the state apparently. But it's the humans aren't forced to work. They are respected and loved and wanted and treated well, and they're better off as part of a dragon's family than they are on their own, because otherwise they'll just be constantly picked up and carried off somewhere else. So it's a very weird dynamic that I found very interesting.
Yeah, I was going to now, but please don't get upset, pet owners, but say that they were more like the dragon's pets.
Well,
that's not upsetting.
I'm
actually probably owned more by my cats and dogs than I am than I own them. Let's be real.
You know what it reminds me of is the abominable snowman from the Warner Brothers cartoons. And I will love you, and I will hug you, and I will name you George.
Okay.
They definitely think of humans as lesser, but not that they're dumb or anything, but it's more like we're big, powerful dragons. We can fly or spit acid or do God knows what else, because that's the thing. Like, we don't really see too much of any of the special characteristics of the Incan dragons, other than the one acid spitter that Iskerka fights. But, I mean, at this point, it seems there are still more humans than dragons, but I mean, not that many, especially when you get into all of the little dragons that like attack them as they're fleeing the Incan Empire and everything. There's like this just flock. Like, you think, to me, I thought of like almost like a giant flock of bats coming out of a cave. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Like, just a shit ton of these tiny little dragons, but these tiny little dragons are still 2-3 times the size of humans. They're like horse size or something, is I think how they're described. So it's one of those things where it's like, I know we're not going to go back there, but I almost feel like we spent way too much time on the ocean with Riley, and on that stupid little island, and then on the boat with the French, and then on the stupid little island. And it's like, I would have liked to have known more about the Incans. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
They're more interesting than you and your stupid little convenient pirate shipwrecked island.
That was a little bit like, oh, and there's an archipelago that'll take you right to the mainland.
Yeah.
Speaking of island, poor Roland.
Oh, which part?
Well, just Lauren's interfering in her life.
like just forcing this chaperone, and now, to be fair, Mrs. Pemberton seems all right. Like, I don't have a problem with her really at all. And we don't really see her much in this book either, because she goes with the French when they drop them all off the island, but
Right.
They take Mrs. Pemberton. I feel more like poor Roland, because she clearly likes the Maine, but he's about to be captain of a heavyweight, and that heavyweight is most likely not going to be assigned to Excidium's group. There goes my dog.
Well, Maximus is.
Well, yeah, but I think it's because they only need so many heavyweights per oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the word.
Well, but isn't
entourage.
But isn't Lily a
formation?
Right.
Formation. Thank you.
But isn't Lily considered a heavyweight?
Well, Lily is considered a heavyweight, but it's like, because she's
smaller than like Maximus and Temeraire, but
well, and also that begs the question: why the heck is Iskerka like? She's not part of Lily's formation, but like, it begs the question: like, are these dragons ever going back to Europe to have like a proper formation again? Because at the end of this book, they're all apparently going to China, and it's like,
no, because well, now I got to get my books confused. No, because they've learned to fight better, with different tactics. I don't see them ever going back to those old tactics again.
Yeah. Well, and in that respect, then why is everybody so sure that Caligula won't be part of Lily's form or of Excidium's formation.
Well, I don't
You know
think
what I mean? Like Lily doesn't need him. Lily has Maximus and Temeraire. And
because
also
they're still thinking old. I mean, some of the officers are still thinking old
yeah.
school.
And Lawrence, like, really in the past you couldn't have more than it wasn't so much about heavyweight in terms of that broad term where Lily is a heavyweight because she's bigger and she's biggish and spits acid. Temeraire is a heavyweight because he's bigger and has the roar,
Sonic breath.
yeah, sonic boom breath. But you know, in the past it was because you couldn't have these huge dragons together because they would be at each other's throats all the time over like who's biggest and who's like in charge type of thing. But Caligula is just like he's like, whatever, man. Like Maximus is all pissed about it. Like, I'm bigger than you, and Temeraire is over here like, no. I mean, he might be the same size, but like he's gonna get bigger and you're done growing, Maximus. Like Temeraire like is not saying it, but he's thinking it. And it's just really funny because Caligula is like, for whatever reason, probably because he was just raised in an entirely different environment, not in the training grounds in Britain. He doesn't give a shit.
Because he was born in Australia.
Yeah, he wasn't taught.
No worries, mate.
He wasn't taught to believe that being the biggest is, you know, all that important. All he cares about is that he gets his food. You know, which is nice.
Well, and that's very typical of a teenage boy. Having been one myself.
But I was thinking more that they're still, even though in Prussia they fought differently and they saw the advantages of not having, basically the advantages of not having a crew on you. Why you would ever go back to that, I don't know. Except in certain circumstances. I mean, you can't, if you don't have a captain, you can't be captured as easily.
Well, I mean, I think it's less, in this case, it's less about a crew and it's more about, you know, them assuming like Excidium already has his formation, right? So they're not going to add Caligula to Excidium's already formed formation. But again, you know, I didn't, it's like, you're right. For a minute, I was feeling a little bit bad for Emily because she clearly likes Domain, and it's like, but she can't, like, what, you know, she even understands, like, I'm gonna end up with Excidium when Ma retires, and I, you know, there's no point in starting a relationship with somebody I'm like basically never going to see. But yeah, that's completely belying the point that things have already been changing in terms of how, you know, the dragons live and how their formations are formed in Britain. So it's going to be, well, I don't know. Like, I want to say it would be interesting, or it will be interesting to see like how that pans out. But I honestly don't know if we're going to get that because this is book 7 of 9, you know, after this, there's only 2 left. So,
or so they claim.
Well, I mean, so far she's been exploring other avenues of writing.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, to be honest, though, I'm at that point where it's like already I feel like this book series could have been
Condensed.
Yeah. Well, all the I mentioned it, or we always bitch about the travelogues in these books, and this one, like I said in the summary, was one of the shorter, less obnoxious ones.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm not a huge fan of travel books, but the ones I've read that Bill Bryson did were really good. But Bill Bryson isn't writing this, so I can do without.
Yeah, I mean, you know, look, she wanted to do the world tour, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I feel like that's actually what a lot of the story in book 6 and book 7, and don't even talk to me about book 8 yet, obviously, is you know, Naomi Novik wanted to she wanted to do around the world in 8 years with dragons, I was gonna say 80 years, but that's obviously not correct. She wanted to go around the world with dragons, and that's fine. But I don't know. It at some point it stops feeling cohesive and starts feeling like pandering to your own desires, and that's how it started feeling honestly, that's how it felt when they were fighting in Prussia in book 3. But then I got over it in book 4 because I really liked that we have to go get this, cure for the plague in Africa. That's fine. Like there's a real driver behind them going there. And now it's like Hammond just shows up in Australia where Lawrence and Temeraire are chilling in their valley. And he's like, well, now you have to go to South America, which of course we knew was going to happen as soon as they sent Iskirka to South America toward the end of book 6 or whatever it was. But at the same time, it's like, okay, when is this going to end?
Yeah. This is off topic, but I like to picture both Temeraire and Lawrence wearing like those Australian bush hats with the corks dangling down. Like Temeraire's just got a big old hat with the corks dangling down.
I just love when Hammond shows up and the dragon, what's her name? Shu Lian, some Lian Shu. I can't remember her name. The massive courier dragon that's like been specially brought by the Chinese. When he shows up and he's all like, oh my God, I've had to travel on Dragonback for 3 weeks. Woe is me. My life is so hard. And he like gets off and he's trying to drink water and the bunyips show up. And then Lawrence comes marching in and with Temeraire and they're like, oh, you bunyips, get out of here. We're going to have to chase you away from our valley for good. It's like this almost conversation. It's not really a conversation, obviously, because the bunyips don't talk back, but it's this, you can just tell they've had this like conversation before where Lawrence was like, listen, guys, I'll let you live here, but you gotta stop, creating these sinkholes and like sneaking humans away from the water. Like, I don't know. It was I never really expected to hear about bunyips again. So it was amusing to me. Because they were such a big part of their little Australian travelogue. But yeah, I mean, yes, it's Naomi Novik wanted to go around the world with dragons, and at this point it's been 7 books. I'm misremembering like which one we're even talking about now. There's so many.
7. This is 7.
Yeah. There's been 7 books, and I loved to hear about the different societies and the different types of dragons and everything, but the just absolute page wasting nonsense to get them from point A to point B, it's just taken its toll on me over and over and over again. And I mean, you
want the Indiana Jones cut where they just show the airplane on a map real quick and then get to the next spot.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit how them, when they escape from the Incans and they travel down, is it the Amazon River that they're traveling down? Like that's what I assumed, but it's kind of, it's unnamed, unclear, whatever. But this, like I said, this one was a much more truncated travelogue, and I feel like it seemed more like that. Like you're just getting this brief picture of them having this miserable time, traveling along the river to get to Brazil. And then they're there and it's like, oh, thank God there wasn't, half the freaking book. Like, cause this book was also, I think this one was fairly short compared to, this one it was only like 300. It was like thinner. Like all the books I have, they're all the mass market paperbacks, so they're all about the same size, and this one was a good bit thinner than the rest of them. So I am over here like, okay, so at least we're not, we had to deal with them being on the ship and I guess Riley dying and being stuck on that island for a bit, but at least like when we get to the travelogue part, it's all very just condensed. which I thought was, maybe Novik has finally just learned to not. And then Book 8 happened, but that's for 2 weeks from now. So Riley dying. And Seth, you can't say anything because you've finished the series, and while I have not, and I don't think Jonathan has either. Like, did he really just straight up die off page like that? Like, because that's at this point, that's what we're led to believe. He's gone.
Well, I thought he was going to come back as the villain at the end of the story, but
I thought he was just gonna come, like he would. I don't know what I thought, but I certainly didn't think that we wouldn't hear from him at all in this book. Like it just, and also how did the ship blow up like that? Because in the book it's, the fire is going and that's all fine, well and good. They sort of have it under control, and then all of a sudden there's like a hole through the center of the ship. Like, what the hell did they have in there that blew it up like that? Or was there something else that blew it up that we somehow don't know about yet?
Well, fire on ships back then was a very, very bad thing.
Yeah, and they had cannon aboard the ship, right?
They did.
Yeah. But it's just it's one of those, and I understand all that. I know all of this, right? I know fire on ships back then, especially, was very, very bad, and I know they had cannon and probably gunpowder, whatever. But everybody, all of the characters, seem surprised that it happens and how it happens, and that's what really threw me for a loop, because it was like, if they had all just said, "Oh shit," and then it exploded. Okay, fine. But they all just seem like, and then there's a gaping hole in the center of the ship and it's sinking. And they're all very shocked about the turn it has taken. And that's why I was like, so did something else happen? Are we missing something?
It's been too long. Someone screwed up in a big way. I can't remember who it was, though.
Yeah.
Which caused the fire.
Oh, it was, so they were stuck in the storm for like 5 days, and then a whole bunch of the sailors just got drunk and decided to cook themselves dinner.
That's what it was.
Yeah, like basically, and started a fire. And it's like, okay, so that's all well and good, whatever, but yeah, I'm still very confused about like the end result. Not even that it destroyed the ship, okay? Like, not even that the fire eventually destroyed the ship, but like I said, all of the characters, the dragons and humans alike, were just like, wait, and then what? Because it just like hole through the way I think it was described was there was just suddenly a hole through the middle of the ship. And I'm just still very, I understand how that could happen. Of course I do. But also, like, why then were they all so confused about it? Is this just bad writing? Is it unreliable narrators? Like, what is it?
Well, it could just be that they were in shock.
I guess. I feel like there was way too much time spent on what happened and like how confused they were about it for it to be just that. But I don't know. I suppose maybe eventually we'll find something out, or maybe we never will, and I'll just continue to be annoyed with the fact that the ship, just suddenly had a hole through it, and everybody was confused about how it happened, even though it had been on fire for God knows how long. And nobody important died.
Well, Riley.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's important because he was. I mean, honestly, I feel worse about the allegiance.
Wasn't he married to Lily's captain?
Yeah, but she don't care about him. Like, when Lawrence gives her the news, she's like upset for like a second, but it's more because she's like, God damn it. Now his like Harridan sister-in-law is going to be bugging me to take in my kid even more. Like, he just started riding dragons. Maybe I can get Lily to accept him as her captain, because I really don't want to have a baby again. She had a terrible pregnancy. I do remember that. So like, girl, I feel you. Like, I've never even had children, don't want them, because I know I would be a miserable pregnant person. But like, yeah, she's like, I think she's less upset about Riley dying, than she is about the fact that like now she has to deal with his family even more because now her son is like the heir. Which also begs the question, like, why was Riley, if he was the heir, why was he a Navy captain or whatever, and not like chilling at home, like playing whist?
Whist.
Game of whist.
Whist. Oh, whist. Okay.
Yeah,
I just said it stupidly.
I guess because he already was in the Navy. You know, he was the second son, and
True.
He went off and did other stuff, and maybe he didn't want to go back and lay about as the rich men of the Regency did, just drink port and join the Hellfire Club and play whist. I don't know.
I think women played whist more than men did, honestly.
I thought we weren't bringing the Hellfire Club into this.
I was going to say, but since you already referenced Around the World in 80 Days, I believe at the very end, like Phileas Fogg's last words are, "Gentlemen, anyone for a game of whist?"
I remember my grandmother played whist.
Yeah, I've never.
I have no idea what the rules are. I don't remember.
I've never played whist. I just like saying it like that because it's a WH.
I should look at what the rules are.
Oh, like cool whip.
Yeah.
I think it's a trick taking game, but that's as far as I know.
But yeah, it's so I guess like I won't believe Riley is actually dead until I have finished book 9 and we never actually hear about him again. So no spoilers, you know, but yeah, that's how I feel about Riley being dead. Cause I just, especially, I don't know, the whole situation just still seems so fucking weird to me. And if that's really just how the ship went and how all those people went, it's like, okay, I guess like it's legit for the times, you know, but it just seemed very anticlimactic in a way. Like the explosion itself, boom, fine, that's not anticlimactic, but then it's just, and the ship is gone and we have saved all the important characters except for, I guess, sort of Riley. And
yeah, you know. and again, well, there's a lot of stuff that happens that's convenient to the plot in this book.
Yeah, in all of these books, yeah.
Yeah.
You mean our friendly Chinese spy?
Oh, Gongs too. And how mad Lawrence is about it.
You know, you keep going Gongs, and in my mind, I kept calling him Hop Sing because of Bonanza.
Oh no! Oh boy!
Not a Bonanza fan, Seth?
This is going to go way off the rails. I am not, but I listen to a podcast. Well, several podcasts. There's Bananas for Bonanza, and then Bonus Nanas for Bonus Nanza, and then Bonus Nanza Extravaganza. But what it is comedian Andy Daly plays a character that he introduced on the Comedy Bang Bang podcast, Dalton Wilcox, the poet laureate of the West. And he and a couple of his friends have this podcast where they're reviewing every single episode of Bonanza because it's the best show ever.
Well, I must admit I loved it when I was a kid, and I still have loved it as an adult when I've seen it, so I think it's pretty good. I'm actually watching Yellowstone now, which is a cross between Bonanza and The Sopranos, and I'm loving it.
That's interesting.
What's it?
I mean, I would describe it a cross between Bonanza and The Sopranos in a modern setting.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought it was going to be.
And Kevin Costner is the patriarch.
An old-timey Western.
Well, that's interesting. I'll have to look that up because I do like Westerns.
It is on...
if they're any good.
It is on the Peacock network.
I see. All right.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm sure you can find it elsewhere, but
yeah,
somehow,
I'm sure I can. All right, so Gong Su turns out to be basically a spy. Now, here's my question: was he? Because as far as I could tell, he couldn't speak English. Like for the longest time, and then all like so was he?
That was an act.
Oh,
Okay,
he was.
that's what I figured. I was like, so all this time it was an act that he couldn't speak English, and
Yes.
wow. Oh, Gongsu. I mean, to be honest, I've always loved Gongsu. He's just like over here, like honestly, and now that he's important, and they have to like, we find out. I don't know if it might be at the end of this book. It might be the beginning of the next one. Sorry, but you find out that they have to kind of like, it's a request, or it's not even a request. It's like, I would love this, Temeraire, I would love this, thing cooked this way. And Gongsu is like, oh, I would love to oblige you. Like it's never like, Gongsu, go cook me this. But I do just like how Lawrence is so like affronted by the fact that all this time Gongsu has been a spy. And it's like, honestly, man, like, I'm just kind of shocked he lasted this long, because they lost all the other Chinese people they brought pretty quickly.
But that's
And
why, right? I mean, he one
well,
of the
the
one of them
others,
didn't one of them want to go home, and the other one,
I think one of them ran off and another one died. I
right?
believe maybe
But
in Turkey, but
yeah, but the one who ran off wanted to like go home, and
yeah,
this one lasted. And why would you last through all this?
because he loves Temeraire, because Temeraire is a celestial. I don't know. I mean, I certainly didn't see it coming, so I'll give them that. I did not see it coming that Gongsu has been a spy all this time.
Okay, let's not
didn't see
call him
it
a
coming.
spy. He was the representative to the emperor.
Yeah. I mean, but who is also very clearly like reporting back to China, So, but I would guess, what could he have possibly said? That was like I think that the reverence they all have for the Celestials, I think would have. Anything he wrote, and also Lawrence, like as much as he annoys the shit out of me more often than not for just being himself, he didn't do anything I think that could be reported back and be deemed bad, or like not becoming of a good person, of a leader, whatever. So
Well, I mean, and certainly one of the big points throughout all these books is, like, the minute Lawrence actually starts interacting with Temeraire and taking care of him, rather than seeing him as an impediment to his career, he's like completely, he loves his dragon.
Yeah, no, he absolutely, there's so much just it was like a relationship he didn't expect. It's like that those posts you see on Facebook where it's like, my dad didn't want a cat.
Yeah.
And I brought home this cat, or my dad found this cat at behind a dumpster at work. And like, there's just pictures of the dad with the cat, like sleep, like as a kitten. And then like, as it gets older, like always like sleeping in the same spot on his chest and stuff. And it's like, that's how I feel it is with Lawrence, only, he also like goes to war and stuff, but really he does whatever Temeraire wants, even when. And now, granted, he always knows deep down it's the best, most honorable thing to do, but that might not have been the choice he would have made before he had that relationship with Temeraire, which is, it's in very small ways, not in leaps and bounds, but in very small ways, Lawrence does grow very much because of his relationship with Temeraire.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's one of the reasons that it's easier to like Lawrence after a while, because he likes Temeraire so much, and because I'm going to go out on a limb and say that we all like Temeraire so much.
Yeah. I would say, like, if you asked me my favorite fictional dragons, it would be Toothless, followed very closely by Temeraire. Like,
oh, that's an interesting question. Favorite fictional dragons?
Yeah. Oh boy, I got to think about that.
I think it's the Sean Connery one from, I can't remember the name of the film. What?
Dragonheart.
Dragonheart, thank you. Yeah, that would be my favorite, I think.
Gosh. Wow.
Yeah, it's not
And Puff, of course, but
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, he's up there. I mean, Smaug, no.
No.
No, Smaug's out of the running. So is Glaurung. So that's the 2 Tolkien dragons who have any lines. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean,
there's a lot, and the thing is,
there's a lot of them.
Of good dragons in this series, right? Like Temeraire is the one that we get the most of, and I think it's almost impossible not to love Temeraire. Skirka is maddening, but also fucking great. Kilingale is just cool, laid back as shit. Preskydia, the dragon from book 5 that Temeraire meets in the breeding grounds, who doesn't want to fight, but ends up like, she's basically like a mathematician.
She's Sam Tarley. She's Sam Tarley. She likes her books.
Yeah, there's a lot of really great dragons in this series, and that's one thing I will say that's really kept me going in this series is I could care less about most of the people. Like, most of the people are just maddening. And the ones that I like are very minor characters at best. Berkeley, Jane Rowland, even Emily Rowland, Domain I like, but he's also maddening, et cetera, et cetera. And then, but Naomi Novik is very, very good at creating these super different dragons who they all have their own personalities. And it's like, I think the only dragons I don't like are Lien but also like, why don't I like Lien? Because she's mean to Temeraire. I don't even know if that's fair to her, poor girl. And Caesar, because Caesar's, if you don't remember that, Caesar is the one, he's Arcady and, oh my gosh,
he's the new dragon from what that.
Yeah, it's the egg that hatches from the 2 pharaohs, Arcady and I can't, Winge, and he hatches in Australia and he becomes Rankin's dragon.
Rankin's dragon, that's right.
Rankin is the one who got who
ignored his dragon.
Yeah, in the first
but seems to be treating this one better.
Yeah, and I think that's really only because it's the dragon he wanted all along, which is like, it's like getting a rescue dog when you really want a purebred, and then later you get a purebred and you treat that one better just because it's a purebred. I feel like that's how Rankin is.
That Rankin would make sense.
I hate him so much.
I have some perhaps good, perhaps bad news.
What was that?
Temeraire is technically a 10-book series.
Why?
Because Naomi Novik published a book called Golden Age and Other Stories, which is a collection of short stories set in the Temeraire universe that was apparently prestige published by somebody, so it's like, $40. But it exists.
Oh, I think I saw that when I was looking, like, originally before we even started reading the series, and I was like, okay, so how many books is this? What's going on here? And it kept coming up, but I was never able to find it for sale for like an affordable price. So I didn't really look into what it was about. That's interesting though. We will not be reading and covering that if it is $40 because lol. I don't know, maybe a special episode someday along the line if I can find a free copy of it somewhere. But well, but, I mean, I
tell you what I'll do, because I am likely to get it at some point before April. So I will do my best to get it and read it, and then I'll hand it off to you.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Provided I can remember to bring it. But yes.
Yeah. Hopefully, 6 months from now or whatever. Yeah. We're talking about Ice and Fire Con, by the way, for random people listening to this. Plug Ice and Fire. I don't think I very rarely mentioned Ice and Fire Con on this webcast podcast, which is weird because it's literally an entire convention based around a book series, Song of Ice and Fire. But so I don't know, on that note, last thoughts about Crucible of Gold. I mean, I didn't like, I had like mixed feelings about this book. It's like I didn't love it. I did love the little insight we get into the Incan stuff a lot. Oh, and we barely even talked about, the whole thing with the Tswana and how that all ended, because like Napoleon clearly brought all of these dragons over from Africa so that they wouldn't bug him in Europe. And then he was basically, as far as I could tell, just going to leave them there.
Right.
Yeah.
And Lawrence, kind of worked out this deal with the Portuguese. And of course, it's like I said in the summary, it's tenuous at best. The dragons who are remaining there are probably going to run into some minor problems, but really how many, like the Portuguese don't have their own dragons apparently. So it's basically like going to be the dragons remaining with their family members. And one of them is, oh my gosh, Lethabo is the woman's name. She was the missionary's wife, and I can't remember for the life of me. I can't remember her dragon's name right now. I think it starts with a K, but he's a big ass dragon, and they're remaining there. So I don't foresee that there's going to be that. Like the Portuguese might try to start shit, but I don't really see that they're going to get very far if they don't have their own dragons. And so, I mean, some of them are going back to Africa and some of them are staying there. And it's kind of like, that's just how we're leaving things, guys. Have fun.
Yeah, I mean, it was the classic enemy of my enemy is my sort of friend deal.
Yeah. I mean, I did really love how in the, like, even when Lily and her whole formation showed up, they're like, yeah, lol, we're not fighting those dragons. Like, no, this isn't happening. Like, Temeraire doesn't want to fight them. They're not doing anything wrong. These assholes just need to suck it up and like stop being slavers. And
well, I mean, that's the other interesting thing that Temeraire has basically created. They're no longer willing to follow orders blindly.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big change, at least that they have not dealt with the consequences of, and may never. But
yeah, I mean, I will say that there is definitely some stuff that gets explored in book 9 around that idea, but I am not going to spoil it.
Well, yeah, I think we kind of figured that because I'm blanking on the name, so I'm picking it up right now. The name of book 9 is
Revenge of the Dragons.
It's League of Dragons, but the way I've seen enough about it to know that there's there must be stuff about America in it. So and based on the time frame and everything, slavery is still a big thing in America, at least in real life. So I figured there would be, some more exploration of that aspect of things. But I think we'll I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, I do I wasn't like mad about the kind of lack of explanation of it. More than 2/3 of this book took place outside of what was actually, like, they were all trying to get to, Brazil, right? The whole thing was, we got to get to Brazil and help the Portuguese, our allies. And then they get to Brazil and they don't help the Portuguese really. And then at the end, they're leaving to go to, China again. And they're leaving it in this, we're sending some dragons and people back to Africa, and we're keeping some dragons and people here. And this tenuous, alliance, I don't even know if that's the right word. Agreement is probably a better word, with the Portuguese. So, but the thing is, like, I don't think we're going to ever see what happens there again. I suppose there's a chance, but like, this book felt like here's what's happening in South America. Bye now. Bye forever. Sort of thing. And especially with there only being 2 books left, I'm very like, okay, so
well, I mean
it was a lot
I assume the deal between Napoleon and the Incas is something's gonna come of that.
Yeah, but also, like, I think it was a lot of pomp and circumstance with very little payoff. That said, again, it wasn't the worst book of the series. I'm still putting Black Powder War up there for that one. at least in my opinion. But I don't know anything else that we want to say, because I feel bad now that we barely even talked about the Tswana and everything, but they really are an end note to this book, is what it felt like. So at the same time, it's like I feel bad, but also I don't.
No, I have nothing else to add, I don't think.
Yeah, I am likewise done.
I'm talked out.
All right. Well, on that note, poor Lawrence, who had found himself content to forget the world and to be forgotten by it, is just back in the meat of things. And there's surely going to be more, as after, the end of this book, they're on their way back to China. So once again, I'm Tara. I'm here with my fellow host, Jonathan, and special guest, Seth. Thank you again for joining us, Seth.
Very welcome.
And thank you for joining us for Sagas and Sass. And we'll see you in 2 weeks when we will talk about book 8 of the Temeraire series, which is called Blood of Tyrants. And I have a lot of things to say about this book that aren't positive. So you're going to have a lot of fun listening to me rant.
I sort of liked it.
So, well, that's interesting to know. All right. Well, have a good night, everyone. Bye.
All right,
Bye.